Hello to everyone here. My name is Sister Eleanor. I'm a member of the Gaia community of Interfaith Franciscans. And I'd like to welcome you today to another part of our series on Claire. Today we're going to talk about Claire and her relationship with Francis. And thank you for the vision check, Brother Sean. What I wanted to do first of all is just to make a few mentions. First of all, through the midst of my talk, I might have to take a little sip of coffee just to wet my mouth a little bit as I talk. The other thing is that, as you well know, you might hear Chewy in the background. So I just want to get all these little things out of the way for anybody who might be here for the first time. He's my little dog, and sometimes he reacts to everything and anything by barking. And just to let you know, this is an informal talk. I have a few things that are written down. I have a few things on the computer that I read. And a lot of what I say is from things that I have known in the past about Claire, things that I have read and kind of taken it to my heart and within me. And some of it is opinion. Okay, so, I'll let you know when it is opinion, definitely, throughout our talk. As I said, it's a very informal talk. We're here to learn about Claire. As I said before, Francis is very much in the foreground. He's always there, and rightly so. He was the founder of the Franciscans. But in essence, she was also pretty much like a co-founder because she brought the feminine aspect into the Friars Minor as eventually they came to be known, all of the followers of Francis. So she kind of made everything complete. It wasn't then going to be a totally masculine type of order or types of orders. It was going to be a feminine as well as masculine order. And it's kind of amazing in a way because what they did is they had the feminine and masculine part of the orders, and then that came together in the Brothers and Sisters of Penance, where people could be either single or married, and it's sort of like joined those two orders together. So it was kind of really interesting. So what we wanted to do when we explored Francis and Claire, mainly Claire rather, in these talks, is find out who really Claire is. And I invited you each week to really take what we talk about that week and then to actually mull it over in your minds throughout the week, either in a formal way, in a meditation, or in an informal way, just thinking about some of the things that we said. Because first of all, us as Teo Franciscans need to know who and what our founders were about. Yes, our founder is primarily Brother Sean, but behind Brother Sean, we have Francis and Claire, who gave us the Franciscan way. So it's real necessary for us not to only know what Brother Sean writes about in his books, etc., but also to know what Franciscanism is about. And the only way we can really know what it is about is to get into the mind of Francis and into the mind of Claire. And like I said, so much in every particular faith tradition, I mean, from Buddhism to possibly Hinduism, I haven't read it in Hinduism, but various Christian traditions all, have something to say about Francis, but little have something to say about Claire, but she's very important. And she kind of completes, as I said, the Franciscan spirituality by giving the feminine side. So that being said, let us now, before we get into the real study of Claire for this week, and what the study this week is going to be, or the image of Claire this week is the image of Claire and Francis together in relationship, what that is really about. So let us now, first of all, as we all do, and if you would like to, it's kind of like a feeling of solidarity when we all do this together, is to light a candle for peace. Because really that's primarily what the Teo community is about. It's about bringing peace amongst all peoples and accepting people just as Francis did and Clare did, no matter what their religion, no matter where they come from, what their background is, if they're sick or not sick, disabled or not disabled, etc. As a matter of fact, like I said, the only prerequisite for joining both the Poor Clares, as they came to be known, and at the time of Clare, they were known as the Poor Ladies. The only requisite that you had to do, or prerequisite, whatever you want to say, is that you had to give everything that you had over to the poor and come into the convent or the monastery with nothing. So that was the prerequisite. They didn't ask you if you were of nobility, if you were a peasant, who you were, what you did before, none of that. Everything that I read just says that the prerequisite is that, just like Jesus said in the Bible in the New Testament, go and sell everything that you have and give it to the poor. So they followed that. They tried to follow the gospel very literally, almost. Actually was literally. To go and sell everything that you have and give it to the poor, and then go into being a nun or one of the brothers. So now that we have our candle, as I said, lit for peace, we want to ask Clare to intervene in our discussion today. We want to say to her, Lady Clare, would you please intervene in our discussion about you today and give to all of our hearts and all of our minds the knowledge of who you really were as a person and what that knowledge brings to us in our lives. In our lives as Tao Franciscans, in our lives possibly as other Franciscan orders, and in our lives just as people, so that we may better our lives, especially during this time of Lent, this time of cleansing ourselves, our souls, during this springtime coming. We want to prepare for new life. And we ask you, Clare, to please do that, to help us prepare for new life. Amen. So we welcome all today, Brother Sean, and we welcome Lita, and we welcome Sue, and all of you that are not logged in. Okay, so I wanted to just bring to your mind that Francis and Clare were both very much passionate people. Okay, and when I say that is they didn't live life in a wishy-washy way, but they were full of passion. They were full of that fire that you saw in the candle that we lit. As a matter of fact, I wanted to talk about some things that Clare would say to her sisters. A lot of convents, if they were not cloistered convents, which I think most of them were at that time, but they always had sisters that were known as extern sisters. They were nuns that went out and did like the day-to-day shopping and stuff like that. So they were the ones that kind of helped the other ones live the cloistered life. But she says that her sisters were not to walk around, or even if it was inside the cloister, in the garden, etc., not to walk around totally oblivious to creation, but they were to engage themselves with creation and to engage themselves in relationship to others. So she said, it's not a gaze from on high. It's not like looking down on creation or looking down even on others. Like you might have some in that time, Benedictine orders, who might have like looked down on the common people or looked down on the poor or something of that nature. And I say Benedictine only because of the fact that that was the only orders at the time that existed, along I think with Cistercians. So it wasn't a matter of looking down on anybody, but it was a matter of relationship. And it was a relationship not only with people, but a relationship with all of creation. She said that they should see themselves in a vital relationship with trees, with human beings, and with all other creatures, and that this relationship is a mutual giving and receiving, and provides for the necessities of life, for the human as well as for the plant and animal and other creature. all participate together in the gift of life, allowing each creature and meeting each creature and human beings to be authentic, to be seen and to be accepted in its uniqueness. There is to be no question of trying to take control, but rather a glorious celebration of life. And that is essentially not to, kind of pat ourselves on the back. We're not doing that. But what we're trying to say is that is what we do in the Teo community. It's not that, we're trying to gain control or look down on another, but we are trying to just see each other as unique and to accept our uniqueness. And then Claire says, when you look at life in this way, it becomes a celebration of life. And she says she speaks of praise as a fitting way for creating right relations with other creatures. Her praise joins the praise that exists in every living being by the simple fact of its existence, of having received the creative breath. And aware of her own place in the cosmos and grateful for it, Claire is content that the tree is a tree, that a human is a human, and that each creature is that creature. So that's the humility part of knowing what her place is in the universe and being content with that, not asking to be any more than her authentic self. And so when we see this, we see that Claire is a person of celebration, and she's a person of life, of total life and celebration of life. And Francis was the same. So that's the first thing that we have to look at when we look at Claire. And we have to get into the mindset of who she was and who Francis was. And now I want to read to you a letter that Claire wrote to St. Francis. She said, "Dear Francis, okay, words are never enough, large enough, or small enough to write to you. But I try again. Buonasera. Good evening." This is just a translation. "I always think about you at this time of sunset. It is during this hour that I put aside everything about the day, which is not important, and hold to my heart our inner path, the love we know. It is a good practice. I can safely say that my small light in the garden of my heart has become a diamond. I feel quite strong, and God shines very bright. In a few hours in the dark of night, I will be sinking inside to our Lord in gratitude. Then I go to sleep. Thank you, Francis, for leading me on this path of chasing God instead of worldly things. Thank you for showing me it is not really a chase at all, but rather a great finding. Finding God always very close at hand, as close as my heart." Francis, we share the true relationship. Many couples live together under one roof and never share what we know together. Surely I miss sometimes not having more time with you in the small moments of life. Then I think of most couples living with one another day after day, but so separate from each other in their thoughts and feelings. Francis, we have fallen in love again and again, landing in the great heart, the garden that extends forever. The eternity we know is the true poetry of life. The canticle you share is music for the heart, inside every heart. And you, Francis, how are you? You are a big fire on the mountaintop that many come to see. I wonder sometimes if they really know who they are visiting. I am sorry that the church confuses people saying you are great because you have suffered greatly. You and I both know, human suffering gives nothing, but perhaps a small push further into our heart to rest on the lap of God. The empty times in life are small gifts we enjoy to be alone with the quiet, with God. We enjoy these times living in the sweetness of God's mystery. Our path is nothing more or less than receiving. Every day is the simple peace. You in the cave of your heart, Me with my budding roses, life is precious. Simple peace, and our hearts wrestle with the divine, being so much for our simple human heart. The birds, animals, planets, and stars are family in these moments, Francis. I know you have tried again and again to explain to the bishops that they are no more special than our homeless friends, the lepers. The rich are no more rich than the very poor. Life's treasure is within us. Why don't people understand that everything is given in the silence of our hearts? Francis, I want to tell you about a daydream I've been carrying all week. I see all the priests and ministers finally agreeing there is nothing to say. Every church, large and small, is just a house for God. People come and sit in silence. There's no preaching, no need to preach. In the silence is all and everything, so much peace. This is enough. And after sitting for a while, everyone absorbing the goldenness of God in our heart, the people share bread and medicine to any who have need. This is the real church. Why did they make it so complicated, Francis? Why? Anyway, this is not the reason I write. I write today trying to put some words to where I have been led inside. I know you already know, but maybe my words support you as well. I know you are burning inside in this fire. Love lightens and overwhelms all my human edges. This very, very, very bright light rises from deep inside of me. Is just I just pray to be available. Truly, God knows we are only human. My selfishness is just part of my humanness. This is not to make excuses, but Francis, we really should not punish ourselves for being human. We are what we are. Can I say that in truth we are this light, only this light? When we leave this world and all our limitations, the angels will welcome us, and we will know for certain. There is so much light. Francis, I know some of the brothers are praying that your tears will stop for the sake of your health. But Francis, don't stop. I understand why you cry and cry so much. It is because of this light. Your tears are the blood of your soul and my soul as well. You cry for all of us. I pray you never stop crying, knowing that each tear is milk and honey for my soul and the soul of everyone. May your joy cry out to all now and forever. In the great silence, only joy, joy, joy. I know it doesn't need to be said, but thank you, Francis. Thank you. Yours forever in our Lord, Claire. So that was a letter, and of course it was paraphrased out of the Italian and written from Claire to Francis. A very, very beautiful letter. And I have to say that Francis and Claire were very much alike. He was 12 years older than her, but they both came from aristocratic families. Him not so much nobility, but high merchant class, and her from nobility. And as I said before, she was very young. She was 18 years old and innocent and in love with life when she learned about Francis. You have to understand that in Assisi at the time, it is a rather small city, but everybody knew about everybody else and what everybody was doing. So the whole of Assisi knew about Francis and what had happened with him and how he left his family and stood naked in the square before the bishop, renouncing all of his possessions and everything he had in the world. So everybody knew about this, including Claire. And already, as I said, Claire had within her this budding reality that there was more to life than the possessions that she had, all the riches her family had, and getting married and getting accepted into another noble family and having the best of everything for the rest of her life. She knew that there was more to life than possessions and things. So she actually sought Francis out at the beginning. She sought him out and listened to what he had to say. And then it was deep inside of her, there was the calling that she should join him, even though there was no women at all involved in this new movement. It was just men. But she knew that somehow in herself she had to go and she had to follow him. The fire had already taken place within her heart. And these two that had the same vision of life had to come together and be as one. Be as one in their vision. They had, as they say, they were not so much two people that were in love with each other, even though we feel that they were. They were in love with each other in a chaste and a pure love, but they were two people that were in love with each other, not looking at each other, but looking to a common goal or to something else, which was God. So in this love, there was a love triangle. There was Francis and Clare and God made their love complete. So she went and she joined Francis. And of course, Francis always took care of her. He knew that she was a woman. In those times, women definitely needed the care of men. So she went and joined him. And he took her in the midst of all of his brothers. They say that there was candles lit. He took her in what is known as the Porziuncola. He cut off her beautiful blonde hair. She was a beautiful woman. Put on a rough robe of gray and a really heavy black veil, and then took her to the Benedictine convent nearby, so that until they got something together that she would live there with the sisters and kind of learn what it was like to be in a convent. Okay, and then after San Damiano was built, she went into San Damiano with many of her sisters, and including her family members. She went in there and they were together in this convent. And so Francis and Clare had a common goal, and like I said, they looked not so much at each other, but they looked to God with a common love. So I just want to say that they were, the two were united in three great passions. They were united in their passion for the poor and crucified Christ, for the poor, especially lepers, and for each other. The love for Christ and the poor did not diminish at all the deep love that united them, showing that between people who dedicate themselves to God and serving others, there can be true love and relationship, and a relationship of great tenderness. Between Francis and Clare, there is something mysterious, a fascination of transfiguration, a transformation that exists between the two. The two of them had the same fire that burned within, and the two of them had the same goal, and that was to love Christ with all of their hearts, to love their God with all of their hearts, and to love the poor. And as I said, to look at all of creation as brother and sister, as equal. But there are some stories that emerge about them in those times. There are several things that we have to say that we have found out about the relationship between Clare and Francis. It's said that Francis never went to visit Clare unless he had his brothers with him, so that there would never be anything said about any kind of impropriety. At times he would invite her to dinner, and his habit was to lay out a dinner on the ground, okay, on the ground. And she understood all of that. She understood Francis and what he was doing, where he was coming from, and what his goals were. They were perhaps the only two that really understood each other and really understood what Franciscanism is all about. That's why it's so imperative for us as Franciscans to get to know Francis and Clare as people and get into their hearts, and for them to get into ours, so we can really know what their goal was and what their vision was. So anyway, he would lay the food out on the ground, but then he would talk so eloquently about Christ that everybody that was there would just be totally absorbed in the sweetness of his words. He was such a wonderful preacher and such a wonderful speaker about God that they would just be totally absorbed and they'd forget about the food after a while. And it was said that when he would talk in these dinners that they would have, that there would actually be like a fire or light that would show up from, it was like in a wooded area, it would show up from the woods, and the townspeople would go out afraid that there was a fire to just find when they got there that it was only them having dinner and speaking about God. So that's some interesting things that, um, that they say about Francis and Clare. Another one was, and I'm going to read this because I don't want to get it wrong. On one occasion, Francis had heard inappropriate allusions. Some people were saying that, she was going there and into, joining this order that was predominantly men, and then it was inappropriate and or an inappropriate relationship, etc. So he went to Clare and he said, "Did you hear, sister, what people are saying about us?" Clare did not answer. She felt her heart would stop, and if he said another word, she would wind up crying. "It's time we parted," said Francis. "You go ahead, and before nightfall you will have come to the convent. I will go alone, and I will accompany you from afar, as the Lord leads me." Clare fell to her knees in the middle of the road. Shortly thereafter she recovered, got up, and walked away without looking back. The path went through a forest. Suddenly she felt powerless, without comfort and without hope, because they were each other's comfort, because they understood each other. And without a parting word before separating from Francis, and this really destroyed her that way, really made her feel bad. She waited a bit. "Father," she said, "when will we meet again?" "When summer comes, when the roses bloom again," replied Francis. And then at that moment, something wonderful happened. It seemed as if summer had arrived, and thousands of flowers burst forth in the snow-covered fields. After the initial shock, Clare hurried to pick a bouquet of roses, and she put it into Francis' hands. And the legend ends by saying, from that time on, Francis and Clare were never separated again. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful legend, and probably not so much a legend, but truth. It was as if they were able to join their mutual love with the love of Christ and of the poor, so that it was one great love. It was nothing that could be separated. You couldn't separate any of it. Clare says, with thanks, that to her Francis seemed so clearly and luminously like gold that she also saw herself all clear and bright, as if in a mirror. So she saw herself in Francis, because what she wanted deep in her heart was what Francis wanted deep in his heart. Her personality was much like Francis' personality. He died at 44, and she died at 60, so she lived many years without him. She spent 48 years in the convent at San Damiano. Or 42, I'm sorry, because she entered at 18 and she died at 60. And also another thing that I want to mention about Francis, one time he was walking along with his brothers, and this is a biographical account. This is something that was written down because after Francis died and after Clare died, the sisters and the brothers wrote a lot of things down, or said a lot of things to the priests and the bishops and all the higher-ups about what Francis said and what Clare said and what happened and didn't happen, etc. So Francis was tired one day, and he came to a source of crystalline water, and he leaned to look over for a long while at the clear water. Then he said to himself, and said cheerfully to his close friend, Brother Leo, "Brother Leo, Lamb of God, what do you think I saw in the clear waters of the fountain?" "The moon that's reflected in there," Brother Leo answered. "No, brother, I did see the moon, but the face of our sister Claire, full of holy joy, so that all my sorrows disappeared. So that's what he thought about Claire. So it says that Francis actually and Claire walked together on a new religious path. They were two in one and the same path, on the same path. As I said, their love was inseparable between themselves, between God, and also the poor. And up to even today, they have never been separated again. So that's one of the beautiful things. And I have to mention that at the end of Francis's life, we've said this before, there was a little hut that was made of wattle, okay, which is sticks and mud, etc. Francis was very sick at the time. And every time that he needed consolation, he would go to San Damiano to be consoled by Claire and her sisters, to be kind of built up again, because there was a lot of things happening in the community. And with every community, there's the ups and there's the downs. And sometimes you can be dejected, you can become down, you can become sad, and it's mingled with great joys. So any time when Francis had one of those times in life where he became very much down, he would go to Claire and go to San Damiano, especially at the end of his life, when he became blind, when he had the stigmata, that is the holes on his hands and his feet, and also in his side, that were the wounds that Christ had at his death on the cross. When he had the stigmata, that's what it's called, the stigmata, and he was very sick, Claire made him a little hut where he could stay, and she attended to him there. She made sure that his wounds were taken care of, they were bandaged, and she was one of the only ones at the time who even knew he had these wounds. This was not something that he flaunted to the world. There was only a few people that knew that these wounds even existed, and she was one of them. So she would redress his wounds, give him nourishing food. She even made him some sandals for his feet so that he could walk a few steps, because his feet were very sore from these wounds. I mean, painful, quite painful. So she would attend to him there, and as I said before, he was so at peace and so at ease being there, and so happy being there, and being cared for by Claire, that he wrote the Canticle of the Creatures there. And it is said that the one line that he talks about our sister water being clean and chasteful, clean and chaste, and something, and precious, I think is what it is, that was actually a line that was attributed to Claire herself, that he called her Sister Water. She was clean, she was chaste, and she was precious. Precious to him, precious to everyone. And so that is some of the things that we find out about the relationship between Claire and between Francis. There's so many wonderful, wonderful quotes about their relationship and how they loved each other. And C.S. Lewis said once that we have a constant choice to love. We can choose which love comes first and which love we yield to. Francis and Claire made the choice to set aside human desires and love God with their whole hearts and souls, and in that love they enveloped one another. Francis and Claire were lovers, though not in the same way lovers are viewed today. They loved purely, without expectation and without demand. Francis and Claire made their lives a living sacrifice and will forever be united in their selfless love for others and for God. So I thank you for being with here today and listening to my talk. And hopefully we can listen to something more about Claire again next week. Thank you, and namaste.